Hello everyone, Eva here and welcome to the next episode of Outside of Life, where I chat with inspiring artists and create various art-related videos. Before we go to the interview, I wanted to let you know that my course Storytelling with Color and Light is now available for you at artsideoflife.com/color. I designed the course for beginner and intermediate artists, breaking the big topic of color and light into smaller parts to help you understand the main concept so you can make your artworks appealing and believable. So check it out at artsideoflife.com/color. And now let's go back to the interview. My guest today is Atey Ghailan, online also known as Snatti. And in this episode, we will talk about why it's important to keep developing your personal art project and your own voice, even though if you are working with art professionally. Atey is a concept artist and illustrator originally from Sweden, now working and living in Los Angeles. He is currently a full-time senior illustrator and concept artist at Riot Games. In his free time, he is working on his personal project called Path of Miranda, which is a story about a young girl and her friends Toki, the penguin, and Wolf, the corgi. He plans to transform this story into a big universe of books, games, and maybe a movie or a TV series someday. And now, please welcome Atey Ghailan, and let's get to the interview. So, welcome everyone to the next episode of Outside of Life, and I'm super happy to have Atey here. Hi!
Hello.
I'm super happy that you took time from your busy schedule and join us even before work. And so now let's just jump into the background, and maybe you can just share biggest turning points, how you get where you are now, and maybe a creative outlets as a child, and when did you decide, okay, I take this as a professional.
Okay, thank you for having me. I've seen a few videos before, so I'm pretty excited to be here. So I think my very first, the question was first contact with creative stuff.
Yeah. How did you start, and when was the kind of the point okay, I will take this professionally?
Yeah, I think so. I started in I was studying law school in university. I was around 21, and I wasn't taking any notes. I was just doodling a bunch of stuff. It was very abstract. But I wasn't paying attention to the class at all. I was just doing doodles. I would go to class and do doodles, and I used to draw a lot when I was a kid, and it kind of resurfaced again in my old adulthood. And at that point, I felt this is something I'd like to try and make a profession of. I didn't know how to do it, but that was the first spark to really get it going.
And did you have a mentor, who showed you okay, you can do it like this, or?
It was a lot of trial and error. I used to use an online forum where there was a lot of people learning at the same time, called concept.org, and that was amazing, because everyone was from all over the planet, and we're all trying to learn and just sharing whatever experience you learned to someone else. That was kind of my starting point, and I learned a lot from that website.
And did you start with a character design, or was it environments, or how did you approach learning? Because the whole scenes, a storytelling scenes, they're complex, and there is so much you have to learn.
Yeah, it's very deep to learn everything. And I remember watching a tutorial in particular. Once I realized that you do need art for games, I learned that there was you kind of could specialize, whether you want to do environment art, or you want to do character, or even if you just want to do illustration-based work. But from this video that I watched, this artist mentioned that it's less people who do enjoy environment work, thus there's more job within that field. And I personally did enjoy environment a lot. I was never really into character design, still aren't. But I thought, okay, I'm going to focus fully on that and push on that, and that kind of became my focus. So from that point on, it opened up a lot of doors for me.
Really cool. And then so did you start maybe a black and white, then you start learning about perspective and composition, or was it everything at once and okay, I want to have one piece which is finished?
Yeah, so I started painting, so you got to know the basic fundamentals for creating image making. It's perspective, value, colors. You need to know these to be able to make your images. But what I did was I was trying to make images without understanding this, and it turned out pretty bad. Like, but every time I did an image and it turned out bad, it made me think like, why is this not working? What can I do to make it better? And then I would do some research and then try to apply it in a new image and so on. Eventually, like you start with black and white, you start understanding perspective, you start understanding colors more, and then start adding narrative on top of it. So
cool. And did you have something like aha moment, like if I do this, then my images are much better?
Yeah, probably the best aha moment is like perspective is very important. Because I was trying to paint without it, and it's not a good idea. It'll always look wrong.
And do you have like a favorite subject to paint as well?
I probably something related to dogs. That's like a big favorite. Now I try to focus a lot on like slice of life moments, like mini storytelling in my free time. And I don't have a dog yet, but I really want one. So it's like for now I can just paint them. So it's like my favorite subject matter.
Yeah, so you can put all the scenes and action moments and everything, and then you can recreate it in real life afterwards.
yeah, precisely.
Oh, perfect. And so how does your normal artistic day look like? Or if someone doesn't know what, like designer for games do, like during the day, maybe how does it look when you get the assignment and how you start working and these kind of things?
Yeah, so it really depends. Like currently I'm working at Riot as an illustrator, for someone who doesn't know. But it really depends on like your team, your project, and kind of your company, because the bigger the company is, for instance, the more you can specialize into one specific thing. When I started off working, I worked at an outsource studio where I kind of had to do everything. But at Riot, I can only focus on a specific thing, like illustration or just environment. And my team currently, it really depends, like we're trying to create something, and sometimes there's a problem. Like as a problem, they want to showcase something somehow, but they might not know exactly the best way. And that's kind of where I come in and offer a solution of how can we present this in a way that resonate with our goals of the product and resonate with the players who eventually going to experience this. So that's kind of how my work day is now.
Yeah, so for example, you would have the idea like, okay, the dog is chasing a cat, and then you have to think about like in what environment, maybe what is the story moment and this kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and how do we want the viewers to feel when they look at that? Do we want them to get excited, or do we want them to feel a bit scared? All that impacts how you make the image in the end.
Yeah, and also the personalities of the character, right? If the dog is really bad and the cat is really scared, or they are like fighting and whatever it is, right?
Yeah, precisely. So, but it always depends on like your company and your team, how they like to work. At Riot, it's pretty free. Like there's not necessarily you have to do X, Y, and Z by this day. It's pretty open. But in return, there's a lot of responsibility expected out of you. They expect you to take a lot of your own initiatives to make sure things get done in time.
Yeah, and then you also present your ideas afterwards at a meeting or something like why did you do certain decisions, right?
Yeah, and it's important to also learn, like, as artists, we it's very easy to talk to other creative people, but when you work in a studio or a company, it's important to know that you're not only going to be talking with other artists, so you kind of need to learn to communicate with people who might not necessarily understand your process or how you're thinking, because when you show someone who isn't creative sketch, as artists, we can straight away tell what's going on or what the goal is. But someone who isn't, you kind of need to think of how can you explain your ideas ahead of time to them. So you got to get to know the people you're working with as well.
Oh yeah, also where in context it will be used, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so what is your like artistic process? As you mentioned, the sketches, and when you get the assignment, do you work with the sketches on paper first, or do you go directly digitally, or do you do like color mood boards or research?
So I usually, whenever I get a new assignment, I like to just doodle a bit in my sketchbook, just super small thumbnails, just for myself. It's nothing I show to anyone. Just to try to answer a few questions, because because I feel like sometimes you can get distracted when working in Photoshop. Like you might focus on too much detail, but when you do it in your sketchbook small in the beginning, it's easier to just narrow down on what's really important. And I always try to think of like probably the biggest question I try to think is like, how do I want the viewer to feel when they're looking at this image? What do I want them to experience? And based on what is the goal for what we're trying to do, you know? And from that way, I kind of walk backwards. How can I achieve this? What colors are going to help emphasize this? What kind of lighting scenario is going to help make this even more impactful? So that's kind of my starting point, and I just move forward from that point on. It's just important to get a good base for whatever you're making, because then it's much easier to build on top of it. Otherwise, it'll just collapse later on.
And do you have the same process for your personal work, or do you work differently if you do your own artworks?
In my personal work, I tend to work differently because I don't really have that much time. I spend about 2 hours each on each sketch I put up. But I try to, like, for them, it's really like I want to communicate a small story, something I experienced, something I read, in the most simple way possible. You know, details are not important, just as long as I get the message across. And I tend to just jump in straight with color since I don't have much time to do those.
And where do you take the most inspiration from? Do you have something strange which inspires you?
I try to pay attention to a lot of things around me. Like a lot of sketches are stuff I overhear, stuff I see. I also like to read articles online, and I listen to a lot of audiobooks, like a lot. That's like when I go to work, from the moment I go to work till I come home, I just listen to audiobooks. I don't do music at all anymore.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because I also really like to listen to audiobooks or, you know, like podcasts or everything around also when I travel. So can you give us some like tips for awesome audiobooks which you like listened to recently?
So I really like, horror, dark horror books.
Okay, maybe that's not for me, but maybe someone else would like it for sure. So
yeah, I like Stephen King has a lot of amazing books. Especially like there's a series called Mr. Mercedes, but also probably among my favorite is the Game of Thrones audiobooks.
Cool.
If you like the show, I very, very much recommend the audiobooks. They're fantastic.
Yeah, especially now when people have to wait 2 years until the next season.
Yeah.
So it's like,
and if you're a fan of the show, there's so much more in the books that you can just soak up and like start to make your own theories about, you know, is this gonna happen or why is this happening? It's fantastic. They're very long. They're like 40 or 50 hours each, but they're super good.
Oh, cool. And do you sometimes draw also fan art or not so much?
I do sometimes fan art from books that I listen to, but often it's things I like, a small story that I'd rather tell, you know, or an idea I have. But sometimes I do fan art, yeah.
And is there something in Photoshop, as you work in Photoshop, I guess, like a lot, something which we should be using, but maybe we don't know yet?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty straightforward, you know. Can't think of anything.
Something cool you maybe use every day, maybe except like Control Z or something, you know?
No, I use it pretty simple. Like I just have a layer and I just paint. I try to keep as few layers as possible. I don't know if that's helpful.
So do you usually paint like on one layer or like maybe 2, 3 or something like that?
Yeah, I try to always keep flattening it because the more layers I have, the harder it is to keep track of things. But like I try to separate out whenever I'm painting, like for instance, the foreground element could be a separate layer on its own. And midground can be on its own, but I try to minimize it as much as I can.
Yeah, because then also if you work and then someone asks you to remove the tree which is in the middle, then you don't have to paint the background again.
Yeah, pretty much. That's kind of why it's easier to do tweaks, especially when you're working for someone else. You kind of want to be able to do adjustments if needed.
Yeah, definitely. Before we continue, let's thank our sponsors. If you love discovering and trying out new art tools, you should check out Art Snacks. When you subscribe, you will get a box of high-quality art supplies every month. I have already discovered so many amazing new products, limited edition tools and exclusive supplies only available to subscribers. Art Snacks definitely helps me to get more creative and try different art techniques every month. There is also Art Snacks Challenge, where you can share your artworks using only the tools in the monthly box. You also get to join the Art Snacks Mix community, where you can talk with other artists like you, inspire each other and improve together. And because you are part of Outside of Life community, you will get a special 10% discount with the promo code ARTSIDE10. So don't wait, visit outsideoflife.com/artsnacks and use the promo code ARTSIDE10. If you are a digital artist, you will love Astropad. Astropad is an app that turns your iPad Pro into professional wireless graphics tablet for your Mac. I use it to work with Photoshop and Illustrator to create highly rendered artworks for my clients directly on my iPad. I was super excited to discover Astropad because the painting apps available on iPad don't have all the functionality like Photoshop. With Astropad, I can use all my favorite and custom-made Photoshop brushes, which is super cool. And because you are part of Outside of Life community, you will get an exclusive 10% discount on Astropad Studio licenses. To get started, go to outsideoflife.com/astropad and enter the promo code ARTSIDE. And now, let's go back to the interview. And so, when you mentioned also the inspiration and just like remembering the moments, how does your normal day or week look like? Do you do something, daily which contributes to your success, like daily walks or meditation or something like that?
So I like to, like I said, audiobooks is a huge deal. I like to read articles online, whatever I can find. I also like, whenever I'm at work or whenever I go out with my wife on the weekends, I always try to just be super observant of everything. Like if maybe I see someone doing something super interesting. I did a small series of LA culture sketches by things I see here. So I really just try to be observant of things I see, and I always carry a sketchbook with me. So I'm always sketching as well. My wife doesn't appreciate that sometimes, but something I always do. I think just being observant of your surrounding and really try to pay attention to the things that you like. You see someone with an outfit that you think is amazing, right? You try to think about, why do you think it's amazing? Is it the colors or is it the shape of it? And then try to use it in your own work.
Do you also write down the notes with your sketch, or is it like a pencil sketch in your sketchbook?
I do a lot of ink, and sometimes I write down notes because you forget maybe the context of the scenario, Yeah.
And when we were talking also about, you mentioned LA and sketching in LA, and we talked about the moving around. How was the transition for you, when you moved from Sweden to LA, and how was it?
Yeah, it was pretty tricky. We had to wait for me and my wife. I was living in a year in Croatia before we moved to LA. We had to wait a year for the visa, but it's pretty difficult. To move here because there's a lot of subtle things which are different culturally, and the way this country works. You have to have credit, and if you're new to the country, you don't have any of that, which makes a lot of things harder for you. To get an apartment and all that. But I would say the first 2 months was a bit difficult to getting used to everything and sorting out everything. But after that, it's pretty easy.
And how do you do networking, in a new town? Was it mainly through the job, or do you also go to some sketch meetups or something like that?
So we have I try to talk a lot because we have a lot of people working at the company. I try to talk to as many people as I can. There's a lot of super nice people. We have also figure drawing at work. I spend a lot of time at work, so I meet a lot of people through that. It's through that I've met some very, very amazing people.
And then now I'm sure someone who is listening, they are, wondering, okay, look, how did you get to LA, right? So did you apply for a job or at Riot, or did they contact you, or how was that?
So how I ended up at Riot, it was a bit random. I was freelancing, and again, my focus was mostly environment work. And I remember I was in this Skype group with we were a bunch of artists, and we used to do like these monthly challenges. You get a theme, and everyone do their own interpretation of it, and then we post it. And in that Skype group, there was an artist who wrote. I didn't know who the artist was at the time. I knew he was in the challenge. He's like, "Does anyone here do environment work, like contract based?" And we were like 10 people in that Skype group, and I was the only environment artist. And I was like, yeah, I can do it. I'm freelancing. If you, I'll send in my work. If you see it's a match, let me know. And if not, thanks for looking. And I didn't know this was for Riot at the time either. And he got back to me and it's like, yeah, man, let's try it out. So we tried a short contract. It was like 65 days worth of work. It went super well, like super easy to work with them. And I did another 65 days, and then it just, eventually became full-time. So.
Oh, perfect. Oh, cool. And how did you find also this Skype group? Was it through the website you mentioned before?
That was through a few friends of mine that I met online, who we used to freelance for the same company, and then, we decided to start, or they decided to start a challenge with this, where you really try to push each other, like you have 1 month to make an image, and when you do it with people, you kind of want to, push yourself. And they just added me to that group since they knew I'd probably be interested in that as well.
Oh, definitely, because it's always good to have this kind of like a mastermind group where they can give you feedback or you give feedback to each other, and so you improve every day.
Yeah, online communities are like super helpful, especially like because when I started, like I didn't know anyone who was an artist, and like the online was like the closest thing I had to hanging out with other artists. So online communities are super helpful.
And what was your first job? The artistic job, and how did you find it?
My first artistic job. So this is when I was living back in Stockholm. It was basically my first freelance job was someone. I put a post up on this concept art website. It's like I'm looking for work and this is my portfolio. And someone contacted me. They basically wanted to pitch a comic to a publisher. And they wanted me to create 12 sample pages. And it took me like a month and a half. It was super fun and the guy was super easy to work with. That was my first freelance job.
Oh, cool. And do you have some maybe more tips about freelance work when someone is just starting out and like, okay, where should I start or where should I, network?
Yeah. So the one thing that's like, there's a few things which are super, super important in my opinion. And I would say the number one thing is time management, because like when you're sitting at home, you're sitting in your own place, you can very easily spend 6 hours just browsing the internet, and that's not ideal. Like I would think about it like if you are freelancing, you would think of it as a full-time job. You're just doing it from your own house. You wake up at a certain time, you do your job, you have lunch at a certain time, and then you stop at a certain time. Granted, it's probably not going to work like that most of the time. You end up working more. But it's very important to organize your day and have very clear communication with the people you're working with. I think that's the most important thing. For networking, I would just try to be active online. There's many different forms of doing that, but as artists, like sharing your work is probably the best way I can think of.
And where are you the most active right now on the social media? Is it the ArtStation or is it mostly Instagram or?
Probably Instagram. I love that app because it's so good. Like you have on your phone and you can just scroll and you see as much art as you like. I love that. I used to be very active on Facebook, but the problem was Facebook, it doesn't target your search as much as you want. You can see a bunch of other things which you might not be as interested in. But I think Instagram does a great job of just like, if you just want to see art, that's all you're going to see. So I love that app.
Oh, perfect. So then if someone wants to, find your art more, then Instagram is the place where you are most active.
Yeah. Instagram is the place.
Oh, perfect. And if you think about back about the whole art career until now, is there something you wish you knew before you started?
There's a lot of things. um, I think probably I would have focused more on. So when I started painting, you kind of influenced by what you think an employer wants to see, and it's totally natural to think like I'm going to draw what I think a company's going to want to see. But I think probably the most helpful thing is to draw what you want to draw, and draw exactly what you like, and that is just going to make your work that much better. And it's also going to unlock a lot of things of like your own artistic voice, which is super important. And that took a while for me to kind of admit to myself I like more stylized work. I like to use a lot of colors. Because when I started off painting, it was too serious, the work I was doing, and it was too muted colors. And it was more I drew it because I thought people would like it, or companies would like it, rather than I liked it. So that's probably the number one advice.
And how was your the art style development? Did you, like, as you mentioned, like the muted colors and the colorful stuff? Did you kind of like focus on it, like, okay, now I want to develop my art style, or was it kind of like along the way?
It was so this kind of came up through the Skype group when we were doing these challenges. I kind of like we had this brief once, and I kind of wanted to challenge myself. I was like, I'm not going to do what I usually do. I'm going to try something out of my comfort zone and draw something I really like, because this is in my free time. I should be able to draw exactly what I want. And that kind of like opened a trickle to what eventually would change the way I work completely. So yeah, that was like the big breakthrough, and I came out of the closet like I like more stylized work.
Like, I need to tell you something.
Yeah, it's very important.
Oh, perfect. And you do a lot of artworks with like light and color, right? So where did you study the light and color? Did you go outside a lot, or do you have recommendations maybe for books or places where we can find a lot of cool information?
I think there's a lot of good books, like particularly James Gurney's Color and Light book. But I think everyone learns very differently, and for me, like I need to put it into practice. When I read something, I need to try it for myself for really to hammer it down. So I used to do a lot of digital still lifes, but now I've moved on to more traditional still life and just painting from life as much as I possibly can. I whenever I can, I try to paint with gouache or casein. But if I don't do that, I always, like I said, sketch in my sketchbook. Just try to always stay active.
Yeah. And do you have like a favorite brand of gouache, or when you take it outside, or doesn't matter for you?
Yeah, there is like when you start using it a lot, you can tell the difference in the quality. And there is if you're starting out, I would recommend just try any brand. It doesn't matter. Probably your first 100 paintings are gonna be so. But yeah, but once you get more comfortable in working with the medium and you feel like you start noticing the difference, I would recommend a brand called Winston and Newton. It's probably among the more pricey one, but it's super good.
Yeah, and do you have also like a favorite pencil you cannot live without? The one you take care with you all?
I like the brush pen. It's super good. But in general, I like whenever I go to the art store, I like to buy a new one each time just to get a different feel and try stuff out.
So you have 100 brush pens and ink pens.
Yeah. Because I always tend to lose them as well. So it's like wherever I lose one, I can find one somewhere in the apartment. So
oh, that's good. That's good. And do you have also like favorite brand of ink you use all the time, or?
No, nothing in particular for that.
And if we go back to the art career and think about maybe the most difficult moment of your art career, maybe what was it and what was the key takeaway? Because usually that's when we learn the most.
Yeah. I think probably when I had to give up. So, when you're freelancing, you have to the more you get recognized as an artist, the more opportunities are going to come your way. And probably the hardest thing is what to choose, you know, because like you can't do everything, and that's probably like the biggest thing is like when you really, really have to think like, if I take on this project, what am I going to get out of it? You know, if I'm going to freelance for this company, is it going to benefit what I actually want to do or where I want to go with my career? And that's super hard, you know, because you can't predict the future. But you can think that is like the one thing, you know, you just got to think about as much as possible and really try to make a choice that benefits you not just now, but in the future as well.
Yeah, because also when we are saying yes to something else, we are always saying no to other thing, whether it's, I don't know, watching TV or another job, so...
Yeah, exactly. And if you're freelancing, you never know when an opportunity will be coming, you know? So it's very hard to predict, but yeah, you just gotta make some hard choices, basically.
And then now when you work as a full-time artist, do you have also different income streams, you know, like selling art prints, or do you like combine them, or you have one main one?
I do Patreon, so that's kind of like an extra income. And I do sometimes, I did a workshop at Blur, helping their artists with lighting. I did a tutorial for Imagine FX. I do very minimum amount of freelance because in my free time, I am trying to invest as much as I can of my time into making my own product and trying to develop my own IP and universe. So it's about the project called Path of Miranda. I try to post of that from time to time, but that's why I try to invest all my free time in rather than doing some freelance work.
And do you share some of this also on your Patreon, or not right now?
Yeah, basically Patreon is a way of like, if you want to see behind the scenes, I put up all the content there, and I kind of record like a journal each month, talking about like, what did I do this month? What did I fail with doing? And what is my upcoming goals? So if anyone's interested in seeing behind the scenes, that's like where I share that.
Oh, nice. And so you do like one video per week, or or you have one artwork per month where you do the journaling, or how does it work for your Patreon?
So basically, like I send it all out at the end of the month, and I put together everything. You know, I usually put together a video tutorial. I send some PSDs for some images, high resolution of the sketches I do, and sometimes I share also there all the studies I do, because I don't think I ever post studies anywhere, but I do a study every day, whether it's focused on portraits or character. I just don't share that. That's something I share exclusively through Patreon. And I also I record a journal, kind of talking about like what I'm trying to do and what my goals are. So.
Oh, super nice. And so let's talk about maybe the goals for the future, as you mentioned, like maybe what are the projects, or finishing the project as a book or as a game, or what is the dream scenario in like 10 years?
In 10 years, what I want the project to be is kind of something that will live on for a very long time, you know, and that's something that can spin out in many different ways and forms. I don't see it as just making a book of this project or just making a movie of this project. I want it to be like, kind of can transform into many different forms. Like, for instance, for this year, my focus is trying to make it a game. So we'll see how it goes, but hopefully by the end of the year, that should be done, and then we'll see what the next steps are. But I see it as a universe, and then trying to pull from it and make different content, you know.
Yeah. And
does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I was just thinking, like, what kind of game is it? Will it be board game or digital game or everything?
It'll be for your phone.
Okay, so like something like an app, or yeah. Okay, cool, cool. And when you're creating your own world, did you start from a character, like in what world it will be living in and how they interact, or was it the world and then you boil it down to characters?
It's a lot of like, what do I like? And I kind of like I'd like to throw out everything I like, and then I take a step back and look, does this make sense or does this make sense? And then you start filtering it out. And then you throw in a bunch of new stuff and you start filtering it out. Because for me, like, I've never done this before, so I don't know what the exact process is, and I don't think you can really find a tutorial on how to make your own IP. I think it's just trial and error and trying to have a clear vision of what you want to achieve, and then just filtering out things that are not that are pulling away from that.
Yeah, and so you will have like a big cast of characters, or will it be just more worlds?
It should be a big cast of characters that you hopefully will like.
Oh, awesome, perfect. And what about like far, far future? And I would like to know, what would you like to be remembered for in like 100 years?
That's difficult. I always want to try to develop as an artist. So I want to see how much I can develop within 100, as much as I can during my lifetime. I don't know what I want to be remembered as, but like hopefully as a digital artist during the 2000 era.
So people would like, okay, this is cool.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. And before we finish, maybe you can share like a last piece of advice or key takeaway, and then we will slowly end.
I think last piece of advice is like, try to be honest with yourself as an artist. Do the things you like, not because what someone tells you to do. And once you start working professionally, I think I've seen a lot as people who get a job in the industry, and they tend to stop doing their personal work, and that kind of stopped the development of your own voice. And I would encourage strongly, like, even if you get a full-time job, it doesn't have to be within art, like always try to draw on your free time to develop who you are and your own take on things, because that is super important.
Yeah, and so do you draw your own projects also every day and also on the weekends, or do you take maybe weekends off?
No, all my free time goes to painting pretty much. So
cool. So like 20 hours a day, also Saturday, Sunday, all the time.
Yeah, sometimes I go out with my wife on the weekends because she's like, Atey, we're going out and then we're painting.
And you still take your sketchbook and sketch outside anyway. Good.
Yeah, so, gotta compromise.
Yeah, so you actually improve like all the time, as you mentioned, like even though you have a full-time job, then you still draw.
Yeah, it's just important, like doing a personal work, even if you fail, that is important, because like when you work professionally, like you kind of don't want to try stuff out and mess up, because most likely you have a deadline and you won't be able to deliver. So you kind of always go the safe way where it's going to work. But that kind of stops certain things to develop as an artist. So that's why you need to do things in your free time where you try the most crazy thing you can think of. Whatever workflow or method you want to try, that is super important for you to develop. That's what I learned, at least, and noticed. That's why I always try to do personal work.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It was super nice. And thanks everyone who joined today as well. And see you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe because I post new videos every week. I would be also super happy if you let me know your thoughts in comments and give the video a thumbs up. You can find all the resources mentioned in this episode at artsideoflife.com. Just type a guest name in the search bar. There is also a couple of free artist resources ready for you. So if you want to listen to the interviews on the go too, make sure to check out the podcast at artsideoflife.com/podcast. Continue to inspire each other, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye!